Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Healthy and Helpful podcast. My name is Dr. Bolanle Limann. I'm an internal medicine physician, and I'm passionate about promoting health equity. My bachelor's degree was in nutritional science, and I have master's degrees in public health and business administration, both of which help me approach healthcare topics from different perspectives. Through this podcast, I aim to shed light on ongoing health challenges with the help of notable guest speakers and share how health centers like Hamilton Health Center and other successful health organizations are tackling critical health issues. In this debut series, we'll be diving into a topic that affects every single one of us: nutrition and healthy eating. While I plan to expand into various health challenges, nutrition and healthy eating feels like the right place to start. Food is more than fuel. It's medicine, it's culture, it's community. But in today's world, making health choices isn't always easy. Nearly 90% of Americans don't meet daily recommendations for vegetable intake, and 76% fall short on fruit intake. Despite the abundance of food in the US, 1 in 10 households still experience food insecurity, with limited access to affordable, nutritious options. These numbers tell us that while we might live in a time of plenty, good nutrition is far from universal. That's why this episode is all about helping you navigate these challenges and taking control of your health, one bite at a time. Today we'll explore practical tips to make healthy eating more accessible, affordable, and enjoyable for you and your family with our guest, Chelsea Johns. Chelsea's a registered dietitian with over a decade of experience in the field of nutrition and dietetics. For the past 3 years, Chelsea has served as a chronic disease care specialist at Hamilton Health Center. In this role, she provides both individual and group nutrition and diabetes education. Her efforts are focused on improving health outcomes, increasing healthy food access, and celebrating diverse cultural food experiences. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you, Dr. Limann. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm Chelsea. I'm a dietitian. I've been working at Hamilton for about 3 years. I've been in the field of nutrition for over 10 years now. I really love what I do at Hamilton. I tell people it is truly my dream job because I really get to bring together several different passions of mine, which is health education, as well as health equity, making health services available to all people, and just the aspects of healthy eating, including cooking and making healthy eating practical. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today and talk a little bit more about what I do.
That is great to hear. And yes, we definitely have a very diverse patient body. And later on in our discussion, I would love to hear more about the nutrition classes. But to start, if you can tell us, how do you help our patients balance maintaining cultural traditions with healthy eating?
Sure. Like I said, this is my favorite part of my job because I have learned so much from working with clients from a variety of different cultural backgrounds. So when I sit down with a patient, I first want to learn more about their cultural perspective, and I see them as the expert on that. So I start a session by asking them some questions to get to know them, what a typical day looks like as far as the foods they enjoy eating throughout the day, what foods are important to their family, and how they would like to work towards their health goals by making changes in their diet. So helping people identify what their goals are first can be very helpful. So, for example, somebody living with diabetes may want to get better blood sugar control so that they can be around to see their young kids grow up and graduate from high school. So helping them get centered on what that bigger purpose is a really effective way to say, okay, how can we take that goal and break it down into small bite-size changes that you can make in your day-to-day to work you towards that while still including a lot of the foods that your family loves.
That's definitely important, meeting them where they are and identifying what their goals are. What tips do you have for modifying a family favorite recipe to maintain cultural authenticity while making it healthier?
That's a great question. So, first of all, I like to make sure a client knows that all foods can fit into a healthy eating lifestyle. Some people will come to me with ideas of certain foods that they love have to be eliminated from their diet, whether they've read that online or if maybe a doctor or another healthcare professional may have told them that, for example, rice is such an important component of many healthy dishes. So including rice as a cultural component is really important to help people feel seen and feel like their food foods they grew up with and that their family sees as important are still can still be on the plate. So instead of eliminating rice, changing a portion size can make a big difference. So, just by changing the amount that they're having on their plate. So, I often recommend keeping it to maybe about what fits in the palm of their hand is a good serving size. You always have your hand with you, so it's a great measuring tool to be able to know what is the right amount of starches. Something else that can be helpful as far as modifying a family favorite recipe would be to change the amount of fats that the recipe may call for, especially when we're thinking about traditional recipes. Many dishes are rich in a lot of oils or butters. Just by reducing the amount that the recipe calls for by maybe a third or up to a half of the fats that it calls for can drastically improve the nutrition profile of that particular dish without drastically changing the flavor of that option. Another thing you can do is add more fiber to traditional dishes. So a few examples would be a soul food dish like collard greens. You could add more variety and fill out that dish by adding things like carrots, black-eyed peas, onions in along with the greens. We work with a lot of Nepali patients here as well. Dal is a traditional Nepali dish. It's like a curry made with vegetables and lentils. So by doubling the amount of vegetables that go into that dish, it can drastically improve the nutrition profile of the plate. And a final example would be for a Hispanic dish, rice and beans. I already mentioned rice, but rice and beans for many Hispanic traditions is very central to their culture. So adding more peppers or onions or calabaza, which is a type of pumpkin that's often used in beans, can be a really easy way to boost up the fiber content of beans, which are already high in fiber. And cooking more with sofrito, which is fresh seasoning that is added to a lot of Hispanic dishes, especially Puerto Rican dishes. So sofrito includes things like onions, garlic, peppers, cilantro, and it's ground up into a or minced into a very fine, almost salsa-like consistency, and then it's added to a lot of dishes to add flavor. It's an easy way to add so much freshness and flavor without adding a lot of extra salt.
These are great examples, and your positivity towards this is palpable. Do you find, though, that there's hesitancy or roadblocks when you make these suggestions to patients?
Definitely, especially when a patient has to think through what does this look like in my day-to-day life? Because when I present these ideas, they sound wonderful, but there may be a lot of steps in between having the idea, to actually having that healthful dish in front of you. So one thing that can be a big roadblock for people would be food access. So if someone's not able to get to the grocery store as often because the neighborhood they live in may not have a grocery store within walking distance, and if transportation's a challenge, it can make getting those fresh options to make something like the sofrito that I mentioned, it may be more difficult to get those items and keep those on hand on a consistent basis. Another challenge might be time, having the time to prepare a healthy meal, especially if, for example, if you're a single mom who is working two jobs to make ends meet, the amount of time that it takes to slow cook collard greens in the kitchen just might not at all be on your radar. So small changes can make a big difference, such as the types of snacks that you might choose by maybe boiling some eggs and keeping those on hand. That's something you can do in 10 minutes versus spending an hour in the kitchen preparing these more in-depth, more challenging, culturally relevant dishes that we've talked about so far.
I mean, cost continues to be a challenge for many people. I know this isn't necessarily your area of expertise, but are there any resources or suggestions you give patients when they talk about cost being a barrier?
Definitely. There are lots of local resources within your area. So things like local food banks and food pantries can be a wonderful resource, even for people who are looking to eat healthy. So I'll just use a local resource as an example. In our area here in Central PA, we have the Salvation Army Food Pantry. Participants can call in and request an appointment. And then when they go in to utilize the food pantry, they're given a shopping cart just like you would at a local grocery store. And that participant can choose the items that they would like, that they enjoy, that are culturally relevant for their family, things that their kids will enjoy eating. And they also have a whole refrigerated section where you can go and get fresh things like fresh fruits and vegetables, milk, cheeses, yogurt, eggs, things that you might not typically think that a food pantry would offer. Other food pantries offer food boxes that you would go and pick up where you may not get to choose the items that are given to you, but you're able to see what you have on hand and get those items earlier in the month if you're able to, and then build out the rest of your recipes based on those items that you've gotten. So, for
Mhm.
example, maybe you got some canned beans and maybe you've never made black beans before, but now you have them and you think, okay, what can I do with this? Look online, look for some simple recipes. You could maybe make some black bean tacos with it, for example. And then from there, build out your list for what other ingredients you might need to get. So you're starting with what you got at the food pantry, building out the list, and then taking that to the grocery store. And at the grocery store, you can save a lot of money just by sticking to that list. About half of the purchases that we make as consumers at the grocery store tend to be impulse buys or things that we see them. They might be those brand new chips that are showcased on the end cap and they have some unique flavor like maybe pickles flavored chips. And because that sounds good, we think, oh, I've got to try that. We add that to our cart, but things like that can really build up the amount of money that we end up spending then once we get to the register. It can be surprising sometimes how fast those things add up. Simply
Mhm.
by sticking to your list can reduce that grocery bill and make it easier to still get the essential ingredients you need to be able to take home and put together the meals that are going to feed both you and your family.
Chelsea, those are great examples, some of which I can apply personally, especially when shopping with my children. We always
Sure.
often end up getting additional items that are not on the shopping list and often not the healthiest either.
Yes, me too. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I also experience that as well. Something else that can help too is if you're able to do an online grocery order, for example, like Walmart has free grocery pickup. It's an easy way to avoid purchasing the items that you weren't planning on picking up at the grocery store, the impulse buys, like I said. It also can save you time. So by ordering things maybe on your lunch break on your phone and then picking those up on the way home and without having to navigate the entire grocery store, especially if you have small children, can be a big saver for both time and your stress levels.
So these are great suggestions when one is buying the food items and cooking themselves. It can often be a challenge when you're the guest and you are at a family gathering and there are not that many healthy choices. Do you have any suggestions when you are not the one doing the cooking?
Yes, that is a big challenge, especially around the holiday season. Get invited to a family gathering or a social event, and you have been consistent in making healthy choices in your day-to-day life. But then when the social gathering comes up, it can be stressful at times because you want to be able to stick with your healthy eating goals, but you don't have as much control over what options are available. So one thing you can do is if it's a potluck style, or if you have the option to bring a healthy dish with you, make something ahead of time that you can bring to the gathering that is going to be healthy, that's not going to just benefit you, but will also provide a healthy option for other guests as well, because there may be other people just like you who are going to be coming to this get together that is once a healthy option available. So, for example, something simple would be to make a veggie tray, to cut up some celery, grab some baby carrots or tomatoes that are like the grape tomatoes, and get some ranch or you can make a Greek yogurt ranch dip just by getting some plain Greek yogurt and some ranch powder. Mixing those together makes a very healthy dip to serve with those vegetables. Or fruit can also be a great option. Sometimes buying pre-made fruit trays is expensive, but if you buy more budget-friendly fruits such as apples, bananas, oranges, those can be really healthy fruit options that you can make them look fancy by putting them in a pretty arrangement on a tray and bringing those along. My guess is other people will be happy to have a healthy snack to eat. Some other options, if you're not able to bring a healthy dish along with you, would be to make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Dehydration can sometimes get confused for hunger. So those signals in our brain can easily get confused. So if you find yourself, especially at a holiday gathering, just craving to keep going back for more and more, it's possible that maybe some of the dishes that you're enjoying there are a little bit salty, and drinking some water may actually be what your body's craving in that moment. Something else that can be really helpful is to simply slow down how quickly you're eating. So I am a very fast eater, and this is one of the most challenging healthy tips for me personally, because putting down our fork between bites is not something we naturally do. But taking smaller bites, making sure we're really chewing and savoring and enjoying our food gives time for our brains to register how full we're actually feeling after eating a meal. It can make us less likely to feel the need to go back for seconds, and it can help us actually enjoy the food instead of feeling a sense of guilt, maybe because it's not the healthiest option. We ultimately need to remember that the holidays are a time for enjoyment, for celebrating, and building those meaningful connections with the people that we love. It's not just about the food that's on the table. So shifting our focus away from what we're eating to who we're eating with can sometimes help reframe that to make it less of a stressful and more of an enjoyable social gathering.
We definitely live in a fast-paced society, and I agree that, we build habits often of eating quickly because of multiple things, be it limited time at work or at sports events. And so the challenge is when we do have time, as you mentioned, savoring the taste, enjoying the company with you and eating, slowly and enjoying every bite is important. And I think many of us, including myself, can put that into practice more frequently. One challenge that many people face, even if following the guidelines that you just suggested, is stress and anxiety and emotional eating. Do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, that is a great topic to bring up because as joyful as the holidays can be, the holiday season can bring up a lot of feelings of stress. It can also bring up a lot of feelings of grief or loss for a lot of folks. And when we experience those feelings, food can often bring us a sense of comfort, which at times can be a very beautiful thing. For example, eating a slice of homemade apple pie reminds me of my grandma who used to make homemade pies, and that flavor just takes me back in time. So, in that way, food can be a source of comfort, but in moments of stress, food can sometimes be a source of emotional eating that can leave us feeling overwhelmed or out of control. So when those moments happen, one thing that can help is to identify what our triggers are. So, what I mean by that is there may be certain social situations, certain places, or certain people that might have led to emotional eating in the past for you. Or they may be situations that trigger feelings of stress or any type of negative emotion. And we're not always able to avoid those situations. Sometimes a family gathering might be very stressful, but we can't simply say, well, I'm just not going to go to that gathering. So, first of all, just identifying the fact that that's a stressful place and that that particular situation has led to emotional eating in the past, that's a huge step in the right direction. Second, the next thing you can do is to prioritize the things that help you relax, help ground you before you enter that difficult situation. So if I go back to the example of going to a family gathering that is very triggering to emotional eating for me, what I can do is think about what can I do before I get to that gathering that's going to help me feel more centered and bring down my stress levels before I walk into that situation. So I often will ask clients, what is something that you enjoy doing? And it's surprising how difficult this can be for us to think about what actually helps reduce my stress levels. And usually I encourage people to think outside of anything that involves any type of technology, such as our phones or TV. Take a step back. You might even have to think back to your childhood. What was something you loved doing as a kid? Maybe it was drawing, maybe it was playing outside, maybe it was spending time with somebody that you loved and talking with them. Maybe it was journaling or listening to music or playing an instrument. All of these things uh, they can still be just as fulfilling and comforting to us as they were in our childhood. So, and this may take a little bit of trial and error for you. So you may try getting a coloring book with crayons, and you start doing it and realize this isn't something you enjoy or it's not giving you any type of relief. it may feel disappointing or frustrating, but that's actually a good thing. You tried something new, it didn't work, and you learned something new about yourself. So then I encourage you just to keep going. Try something else. Find something that is going to give you that sense of groundedness. And then once you get yourself in that mindset, you're more easily going to be able to walk into that stressful or triggering situation with a mindset that is ready to handle those more stressful situations. Now, that's not to say that you may not feel the sense that you need to resort to food for comfort. Those feelings may still come up. Excuse me. If those feelings still come up, you can simply take a moment to take some deep breaths. That's one thing you can do when those moments hit that you feel like you want something sweet. Try starting with something that has a little bit of protein or a little bit of fiber. So, for example, if there's some whole grain crackers, maybe start with that. Maybe there's some chicken salad you could have with that. And dig into that a little bit. And then if you want something sweet, if that tends to be more of a trigger food for you, then enjoy that food. Starting with something that has that protein is going to preload your body with something that's going to help send those fullness signals to your brain to say, okay, it's time to slow down. I've had enough of this sweet treat. And so that you feel more in control in that moment to be able to enjoy that delicious slice of apple pie or whatever it might be, but to say, okay, I've had enough, and be able to put your fork down and be done.
Thank you, Chelsea, for the recommendations you've shared. And for our listeners, I know this is a challenge for many people, and hopefully you've learned some tips from Chelsea, but by all means, reach out to your primary care provider, nutritionist, dietitian. There are multiple resources available. And for those who do not have health insurance, I would recommend looking for the closest federally qualified health center, because federally qualified health centers will take patients irrespective of ability to pay or insurance status. Are there any resources you can share for finding healthy recipes online, especially ones that are culturally sensitive?
Yes, the internet is a wealth of healthy recipes. Now, if you would just Google healthy recipes, you are going to see primarily American style healthy recipe ideas be some of the first things that show up on Google. That can be frustrating for a lot of folks, especially for those who did not grow up in an American style kitchen where they had different cultural recipes present. So sometimes Google is not always great at showing diversity as far as healthy options as far as cultural food. Google's not always great at showing a variety of cultural perspectives when it comes to healthy eating. But that doesn't mean that those options aren't out there. So a good way to find a culturally relevant dish that maybe you want to find a new way to make over into something healthier would be to pick that dish and then put it in Google and then ask Google to find you healthier versions of that dish. So for example, Dominican tostones recipe, and you want to find a way to make tostones in a way that is much lower in fat. So you might search low fat tostones recipe, and you'll find that there are plenty of ways that you can skip the deep frying and instead maybe make it in an air fryer, or you might use a little bit of oil in your pan and lightly toast them in the pan and then finish baking them in the oven. So finding these different techniques for preparing something you already love can really transform the nutrition profile of that dish without losing a lot of those flavors that you love. Another option would be a website that I personally love, which is called Old Ways. So the website is actually oldwayspt.org. And at that website, you can find tons of culturally relevant resources and recipes. I get many of the handouts that I use with clients for free from that website. They have tons of food pyramids for various cultures, including an African style food pyramid, a Hispanic or Latin American style, Asian style food pyramid, as well as a Mediterranean style food pyramid. And each of these gives you a variety of foods that are relevant to your culture seen pictured in your typical food pyramid. So if you look at the typical American pyramid, you may not always see the foods that you love in that pyramid, but that does not mean those foods are not healthy. It just means that that pyramid, it may not be representing your culture well. So that's why this website is such an awesome resource. And in addition to the food pyramids that you can find there, you can also find tons of free recipes there. And when you go to their recipe archive, you can search by different cultural traditions. So you can filter all the recipes by Asian, African, Mediterranean, Hispanic, and so on to find culturally relevant recipes that either maybe that are familiar to you, or if you want to explore a different culture, it can be a really fun way to find both a different or unique recipe you've never tried, while also knowing that its ingredients are going to be founded more so in traditional cooking without using a lot of additives or a lot of prepackaged items, and using more of the things like whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean protein sources, beans and lentils, those types of foods that are so foundational to healthy, culturally relevant food choices.
Great. I appreciate the affordable, culturally sensitive website you recommended, oldwayspt.org. I will definitely check it out myself. Well, as we come to the end of this episode, I'd love to hear anything else you have to share, and I would love you to highlight a little bit about the cooking classes.
Sure. So I would say if you have never worked with a dietitian before, I encourage you to seek out the care of a dietitian, because it can be really difficult, first of all, to ask for help in any area of our lives. But by bringing in an expert to help you navigate the health concerns that you're facing, along with helping you to clarify exactly what your health goals are, can be so powerful to to propel you in the direction that you want to move in with your health. Having someone that gives you the opportunity to try different recipes you've never tried before, or help you navigate maybe some of the emotional eating things we talked about today, that resource can be life transforming, not just for yourself, but also for your family as well. And so something else I do other than my one-on-one sessions, like you mentioned, Dr. Limann, is the cooking classes that we do here at Hamilton. So they are my favorite part of my job, because those cooking classes are geared towards making healthy foods budget friendly and easy to prepare in the kitchen. So here at Hamilton, we do not have a fancy teaching kitchen on campus here, as much as I would love that. But in some ways, that limitation actually works to our strength in cooking class, because we only use just some of the basic things that you would find in your kitchen at home. So things like a mixing bowl, a spatula, things like measuring cups. We do have a convection oven that's like a tabletop one that we're able to utilize to prepare different recipes. And we also use like a cooking skillet, an electric skillet that works very well. But these basic things that you probably already have at home can really transform some really basic ingredients, such as canned goods, into something that's really delicious and budget friendly. So every recipe that we choose for our class is $5 or less to prepare. So our goal is to
Wow.
make every participant feel like they are able to purchase the ingredients for the class. And something else that's really special is participants who have attended the class at least once get the opportunity to co-lead the class with me. So if a participant has a recipe that they would love to teach others how to make, they can bring the recipe to me. We'll meet and talk about how to present that to the class. And then we purchase all the ingredients, and the participant can come in and teach the rest of the class how to prepare it. And it is so fun because I have gotten to try all types of foods that I never would have tried otherwise. So for example, we recently had a Peruvian participant who she knows how to make lots of Argentinian dishes. So she made this delicious butternut squash that was stuffed with tuna and cream cheese and vegetables. I never would have thought of making a stuffed butternut squash dish. But she said this is a traditional Argentinian dish that she prepares regularly for her family, and it was amazing. So I have learned just as much from my participants as they probably have learned from me.
I would love to join one of your cooking classes. Thank you for everything you do, Chelsea, for our patients. It's always a pleasure working with you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much again for the opportunity, Dr. Limann. This was a lot of fun.
This brings me to the end of the first Healthy and Helpful podcast. To our listeners, thank you for being a part of this conversation. I look forward to having you join me for the next episode of the Healthy and Helpful podcast. Until then, be well.